Welcome, everyone. I'm Angelo Robles, and welcome to Family Office TV, and for my members of SFO Continuity, welcome. It's a great pleasure. It's been an incredibly active week for me coming off the late summer and the unofficial end of the summer with the Labor Day weekend, and I'm very fortunate to wrap up the week with what I've been probably looking most forward to. Not only do I have a great guest, although we're doing a unique format, and certainly someone I respect with his intellectual knowledge in the community. So I'll explain what we're doing in a second, but the core theme is the Family Office of 2030, Robles and Smith Speculate Turn of the Decade. So I'm excited to be joined today by R. Adam Smith. We're going to delve into the Family Office of 2030. It's crystal ball time. Maybe we'll be right, maybe we'll be wrong. But I think the act of thinking through and strategic planning is very, very important. In a world with rapid advancements in AI and broadly technology is reshaping industries. And a shifting geopolitical landscape is creating, in my opinion, a multipolar world. There's no shortage of speculation. Together, Adam and I will explore how these forces will redefine family offices over the rest of this decade. We'll examine the implications of emerging political regimes and strategies for family offices that I believe, and I'm sure Adam does as well, will help family offices to adapt in the thriving environment. This is honestly more than a discussion, and it's not a debate. It's a discussion. It's a blueprint for navigating the complexities of the future. I'll start with Adam. Welcome to the show.
Great to be here, Angelo, and to be on a show with you again. I appreciate the topic today. It's an exciting time, I think, for all of us to be thinking about the world at large and the interconnection, right, between finance, investing, and also the broader geopolitical and economic ecosystem. So great for you to put this agenda together and have a dialogue today.
My pleasure. So we have about 6 core themes within the subject of the Family Office of 2030 that we're going to cover. How we're going to do it is we're going to rotate. I'm going to begin. The first one is going to be geopolitical shifts. I'm going to be given 4 minutes because with me, I do need a clock. We all know that. I may shock you on some of these and be under 4 minutes, but probably not on this first one since geopolitical is kind of right in my alley. So I get 4 minutes, and then basically Adam will give his perspective. Again, not in a debate format, simply arguably different perspectives, and that will cause you all to what I think is most important, and that's to think for yourself. So on that note, I am going to wind up my clock, Adam, and I'm going to go first. Here we go. So geopolitical shifts heading into the end of this decade, I think, are going to be radical. There are certain times in certain decades where the remaining 5.25 years may not have that much of an impact. This is not one of those 5.25 years heading into 2030. This will be intense. And the geopolitical landscape is definitely going to be a part of it. First of all, we've been living for the most part in the unipolar world. We all know Bretton Woods. We all know the US dollar. The world is, quote unquote, settles in dollars. And that's been a very important aspect for the United States. We had, of course, our challenges with Russia going back to prior decades, the rise of China. And I'm going to argue not even a bipolar world at the second, but more multipolar. And that's going to create what I could argue are going to be grave challenges. We have China. We have Brazil. We have Russia, we have India, we have the rise of Saudi Arabia. And I think India, although the next 5.25 years, they won't be as impactful, but over time, that will be heavily impactful. So what does that mean from a strategic and investing perspective? Those are some things we're going to get to a little bit later. But do I think most American families specifically are overly allocated, probably 95% plus, to dollar-denominated assets? And would it be good, I'm not saying easier, but would it be good from a risk mitigation perspective to have more diversity? And I think as the world plays out and the dollar now is about 70% of, let's call it, global transactions, that will get lesser and lesser as the years go on. There will be one day when the dollar is not king. I don't think that's going to happen anytime in the relatively short to immediate future, but I don't think that's 50 years out either. We have regional instability. How will SFOs then navigate the challenges that we're going to be facing? Like I said, in my opinion, US families are, for the most part, overly denominated in dollars. And in hedging risk, what could go wrong? I do think we're going to see the rise of international epicenters, more so for international non-US families that get greater tax arbitrage and are not tied into a green card or US citizenship. Now, I think the US is awesome and is going to be the place to be. But for those that are international that may want to consider options in the United Arab Emirates, in Singapore, and in Switzerland, I think all of them have negatives. Again, all of them. But all of them have certain strengths as well. I think trade and sanctions, we're hearing about what? Potentially tariffs on Chinese goods. I think that would cause here in the US greater inflationary pressures, and we're not ready for that yet. Although it sounds good on the surface, I don't think that's necessarily a good idea moving forward. When it comes to things like tax policy, the threat that we're hearing now of taxing unrealized capital gains, that is utterly ridiculous and would be a death blow, not only to the stock market and to a sense of freedom and spirit of the American way of capitalism. I would hate that. And by the way, I think that basically is also a front to basically find ways to really eliminate and tax the middle class over time. There's other topics like war and threat, and in my opinion, the grave decline in Europe that we're going to see over the next 5 years. But I'm already about 21 seconds over my time. Adam, I'm going to kick that subject off to you.
Good start, Angelo. Packed a lot into 4 minutes. I'll try to match you there. Since you took the approach, even though my name is R. Adam Smith, that you took more of a globalization, multilateral approach, I feel like I should lean towards the American exceptionalism for a bit, although I'm not going to say that I always will embrace American exceptionalism, but you're on point. First of all, let's talk about the global economic system. We're in a period of deflation, but with excessive stimulus, as we know from the last couple of years, and that's been an era that has not occurred in that particular way before. So I think there's a lot of economic data that's confusing. There's supply chain issues that are confusing, and as you said, Europe has been a bit sideways. There's a massive amount of costs going through the system with regards to post-COVID, wars, healthcare, infrastructure, tax changes, and defense spending also is coming back. So I think that will create a lot of noise in the relative economic positions of our ecosystem. American exceptionalism is still going strong in many views, in the sense that there is no other America that can pull up or drive the global economy, create technology innovation. We're way ahead of the curve for now on technology, especially in chips and innovation in general, and sharing that globally in terms of getting that capital, the intellectual capital out in the world, although there is some protectionism, which we see recently, of course, relative to China and in general, which I don't think is a healthy thing longer term. It's more politically motivated, as you said in previous episodes. So if we look at Europe, as you say, as sort of sideways because of the structure of their of the EC, of the fluidity of labor, the challenges of having cohesive monetary policy, high taxes. Also, as we may want to discuss, there is a declining birth rate and somewhat of a Malthusian challenge in the world, in the advanced economies. As wealthy countries grow, they tend to have negative growth rates. That is going to become an issue more and more that needs to be looked at by family offices and larger investors thinking about, where is productivity going to occur? Where, how do you allocate assets across the global ecosystem? How will budget deficits and defense spending and innovation and recycling wealth, recycling capital, even if it's capital gains taxes, how much liquidity, how much power do governments have to recycle value and power and liquidity intelligently back into the private ecosystem? So I'd like us to talk about that a bit further in our next topics. So in summary, I'm with you on the importance of the global economy. The trends can flow back and forth over every 5 to 10 years, but I think over the next 10 years, if we have a effective presidential transfer of power in whatever direction that goes, if we have a sort of steady interest rates and inflation, putting aside some of the domestic challenges we see in our own country in terms of infrastructure, I think we'll be in pretty good shape the next couple of years.
Perfect, Adam. Thank you. I'm going to be setting the clock in a second for the next topic that I guess I'll lead on to kind of keep one on, one off, one on, one off. Investing in a complex global economy. And here we go. I'm going to do a little bit of a continuation of what I said before, and this will tie into the subject of investing in a globally complex economy. Part of it also is going to be the massive deficit that we have broadly in the West, definitely here in the US. GDP, because of declining populations and a variety of factors, is not getting better. Could AI and robotics impact that? We're going to get to that. And that may be, and also energy issues, all things that we're going to get to. But how are we going to service the debt, which is already over $1 trillion a year, if you exponentially grow that for what's occurred the last couple of years? I can make the argument the debt payments alone, let alone other things like military, social services, are going to exceed what we take in from tax revenue. It's going to be an impossible scenario unless we grow our way out of it. So how does this relate from the investing perspective? Family offices are able to have additional opportunity, I could say, in alternatives, including certain real estate, private equity, and venture capital. Am I the biggest fan of being a 2 and 20 investor? My audience knows the answer to that is no. I'm a great believer in single family offices and doing things internally. And I'm a great advocate of taking charge and doing it as a direct investor. I also think that many funds are not going to beat the benchmarks that they should be compared to. They're not as liquid. I don't exactly know what I own. That alone is going to be important, let alone of the fact net of fees. Probably 93% of them are not going to beat the triple Q in certain indices. That being said, is it strategic to have diversity from an investing perspective? First of all, know what I said earlier about overly reliance on dollar-denominated assets. Having greater diversity, I think, is going to placate better from a risk mitigation perspective moving forward through the end of the decade. I also look at the advent of AI, of robotics, in drones, the opportunity in public and private opportunities to be more tactical in the investment portfolio, as I think those will be greatly impactful in the next 5.25 years. I would look at logistics, including supply chains and everything from ports to trucking to rail. But definitely, I would also look at the modernization of what I said on logistics and things like data centers, which relates to what I said earlier about things like AI, biopharma, issues pertaining to longevity. We're going to have a lot of radical changes occurring in the next 5.25 years. And I do not think as a society and even as family offices that many of us are ready. If I had to give one really significant tip about the next 5.25 years, and maybe China invades Taiwan and that changes a lot. Maybe nuclear war happens. Maybe a solar flare happens. There's black swan things that could happen that throw all of this out the window. But energy. That's also an indirect play for AI and the opportunity in data centers, whether it's oil, whether it's green, and whether I may talk about in my AI segment, the upcoming future of superintelligence and the opportunity for fusion energy. You could look at sustainable and impact investing. How will that change as the younger generation comes to an age of more power over the next 5 years? That could be more important for them. I may have unique and different opinions from that perspective, but I'm just saying, forget me, what I think others are going to do moving forward later in the cycle. I think emerging markets like Africa and Southeast Asia, ex-China, are going to be intriguing to look at. Those are areas I would consider. I would consider currency plays. I mentioned about being overly, quote unquote, US dollar denominated. Look at opportunities, and I'm not saying they're easy. The Norwegian krona, the Swiss franc, the Singapore dollar. I think you need to have strategic opportunities, an onshore and an offshore plan. And yes, my way is going to be more complicated. I'll admit that. But I think this is, quote unquote, the way to go. I am also a huge believer in ranch and farmland. That's why I also have property in Wyoming and why I'm active there. And I think placating or playing into the subject that we're talking about here, and again, we get 4 minutes. So it's a very brief, truncated amount of time. As we heard right there, my final comment would be Bitcoin. I think the world of crypto, specifically proof of work like Bitcoin is, and the escape velocity that it's had since its launch, whatever, about 16 or so years ago, makes it intriguing looking at it from, quote unquote, a global and a risk mitigation perspective. Adam, the floor is yours.
Okay, tough act to follow as usual. I'm going to agree with most of what you said. Let's look at it from the family office perspective or the family enterprise perspective in terms of so many different options to look at investing with public versus private, looking at the traditional asset allocation, efficient frontier model. We know that's been changing. I'm so glad that you are a proponent of alternative investments. I've been in several private equity platforms in addition to M&A, and I see that there is a massive expansion of alternative investments, as we know now in credit, secondaries, not just traditional private equity, not just traditional venture capital and real estate. Back to your point, in the next 10 years, I believe that the numbers we're seeing from Camden, from Preqin, from Carta, the posts from our friends at UBS, Ron Diamond, I think these numbers are on track. But if we look at the continuous deflation in the global economy, which is driven by some of the issues you've mentioned, budget deficits are stubborn, tax collection is difficult, domestic challenges in terms of the need to support the health safety net, education, infrastructure, all the challenges in a modern society, including the US and Europe, are behind the ball. So whoever comes in as president in the next decade, there's going to have to be continued pull of the balance sheet from the government back into the social ecosystem for infrastructure. Hopefully, some of that support between the public and private sectors can drive innovation and energy. As you noted, I think that it would be very impactful if we could rely less on OPEC and if we can create some additional innovation and lower energy costs through technology investments and collaboration around the world with our allies. In terms of alternatives, I think there's a chance that there could be an outlier coming into our later topic about outliers. I think there could be a massive expansion in real estate. Again, looking at the curve of where we are economically, particularly in commercial real estate, given valuations in this country. There's been a massive deflation in certain areas that could be exciting for family offices or any private investors looking for that asset class, looking at teens returns, but also the asset, like you said. On that note, I would also note the importance of the single family office holding. Like, where did the wealth come from? What is the core asset? How large is that business? How can it expand? Can there be a roll up, a consolidation, a leveraging of that asset, and build the passion, build the value in a single healthy company? At the same time, there's many of my friends and clients and families that are diversifying. As you said, it's healthy to have diversification across global equities, global currencies, I think, Angelo, it depends on, you know, what is the risk adjusted returns? What is the willingness to incur beta by an investor X that is willing to double down on their beta on a single company, or to stay in the US, or just to go long into alternatives? So I think there's no right answer, but I would support the thesis that family owners that have a very healthy core operating company should pay additional attention and nurture and expand that company, because there is value in what you know, and ultimately you're recycling value into the single operating company.
Of course. Very insightful, and thank you, Adam. Before I continue to clock on the next subject, which, by the way, is the role of deep tech, AI, robotics, and superintelligence, and how I think in 4 minutes how that could play out in the next a little over 5 years. But before we get to that, a little bit of context for those of you that want to take this a step further. About 2 months ago, I actually bumped into Adam, the first time I've seen him in a couple of years, although we talk relatively frequently. I was going into the Lowe's Regency Hotel, and there is the eloquent Adam Smith himself. It was great to see you, Adam. But it does remind me, why was I there at like 7:55 in the morning? Is because every month I host a breakfast series in New York for my members. And I'm thinking now, I didn't use my head. Should have invited Adam to the table, because it's these kind of discussions that honestly at traditional family office conferences, you're not getting, partially due to ignorance, partially due to some topics, although not as much so far. But when we go into geopolitical and others are very sensitive and people just don't want to talk about them. I like the uncomfortable. Perhaps that doesn't make me a beloved figure in the community, and that's fine. I don't care. All I care about is, yes, I'm very opinionated. Hopefully I come at it with some deep experiences, traveling the world decade after decade, knowing thousands of families. And Adam has incredible experience as well, and hosts his own podcast that I also recommend that you all subscribe to and listen to. And the opportunity of coming together face to face, nothing recorded, having people like Adam and others surrounded by great and intellectual families, and going hardcore. Sometimes we yell at each other. It's okay, by the way. Don't be afraid. If you want to be a part of that, go to angelorobles.com and simply join. It's 30 founding members, and you'll get some of the real talk going on in the community. On that note, let's restart. I'm going to 4 minutes, the role of deep tech, AI, robotics, and superintelligence. Here we go. So, a lot is going to happen in the next 5.25 years, and practically none of you are ready. Is it possible my timeline's a little off? Sure. I'm not a Nostradamus. I don't have a crystal ball, but I'm going to be right. It is just going to be a matter of timeline. So currently, according to Jensen Huang, the founder and CEO of NVIDIA, the rate of compute power, aka chips, is basically doubling every 1.08 years. Let's just call it's doubling every year. If you extrapolate that, and I know it's not linear and things can come up, that'll be 1,000x more in 10 years. What do you think? You think it ain't bad now. It's going to be wickedly incredible sooner rather than later. Do you know LLMs are going to get better and better and better? That is already leading into AI agents. The impact on MFOs and SFOs, we don't have enough time to do a dive into AI agents, but you're going to see billion-dollar companies be founded by singular persons or a small group, and you're going to see dynamic changes and challenges to the workforce brought upon by AI and robotics, and including AI agents. Subscribe to my platform and listen to some of my interviews, including one upcoming on AI agents with a brilliant Silicon Valley expert. I've interviewed Ray Kurzweil. I know a lot of prominent people. I go to Silicon Valley all the time, and I'm scared, but also a little bit excited. That is going to lead its way into AGI probably by 2028 or 29, and that is going to eventually lead to superintelligence, which we may or may not have enough time to get into. That will change everything. It may be a utopia. It may be really, really bad. So now is the time to take advantage of investment opportunities. That's one thing I would say. So AI-driven investment strategies, even without AGI, just simply LLMs getting better, and even to some degree AI agents, is going to get wickedly good. It's going to give some people an edge that are at the forefront of this. The opportunity in robotics, we're already seeing it now with Elon Musk, Tesla, via Optimus, with Figure 2 and others. Shockingly good. And it's getting better and better. The impact in manufacturing, the impact that AI is going to have on biopharma, on tech, on the advent of longevity. Eventually, what superintelligence could likely do to fusion energy, and that will change the whole energy dynamic really around the world. Super intelligence basically means it's going to be a number of times smarter than I think the collective of all the human race. Is that going to happen in 6 years, 10 years, 20 years? It's not going to be much longer than that. And then that is going to be a dynamic change in governments and military, space wars. I could go quote unquote on and on. Imagine the cybersecurity risk that you're facing now, and you think they don't know about you as a family of wealth or an MFO. The nation states and others are wickedly smart, and they will come after you. You all have your head in the sand. You're not prepared. The disruption to the workforce, including in the single family office and multifamily office, you will feel it by the end of this decade. Within the 5 years after that, it will be major impactful. To think that it's only going to be human to human interaction, to think that you're comfortable where you are, that you're not adapting, you will lose. You won't make it. You might make it to the end of this decade, but you're going to see a lot of changes between now and then. If we're still here as a society, given all the challenges that we have and the potential destruction and civil wars that might happen, are you thinking about these things? Are you prepared? Like really, like sometimes and I know I'm a little blunt and direct, and again, I know I'm not everyone's cup of tea, trust me. Like if you're not thinking about what could go terribly wrong and ways that you could hedge it. Now, the next subject, I'm going to go a little bit more into that, but you all heard the clock go off, so I have to start to be quiet. Thankfully, audience is probably clapping. And Adam, I am going to give you the floor and even give you an extra 30 seconds. How about that? Boom, you're on.
Let's go. Very generous with it. Additional tip. Thank you. And for teeing up such a complex topic at a very important time in the world for humanity, also for governments, also for leaders, and for our presidential election, and then down to the single family office and the families that are sitting on companies with hundreds and thousands or tens of thousands of employees. As you said, the family office and the family business is, depending on what you call it, is 70, 80, 90% of the world economy. That's why Angelo and other experts and myself are very attentive to this industry, because it is massive and it tends to be quite fragmented. Fortunately, single family offices have, as I mentioned, companies that have scale, although they are at risk for the technology changes and evolution that is going faster than the ability of each family to understand what is going on. So how can a family office, how can a large family business get that information? You can hire a big accounting firm. You can have inside talks with experts like Angelo. You can bring in a strong CTO. You can do everything combined. However, the rate of change that Angelo is referring to, which will also be empowering in terms of operational efficiencies, will also create disintermediation in certain industries. So I think the dichotomy and the dispersion of economic growth, of economic change, of the velocity of change is going to be magnified based on AI and based on also the tech concerns that Angelo's referring to. More broadly, there are those, looking at, let's say, the multifamily offices or the holding companies or the consolidation strategies. I know that typically Angelo talks about like the singular power and the usefulness of the single family office. At the same time, a single family office or a family, whether you not have a family office or not, could think about the theme of collaboration, creating scale. How do you, when you're facing dramatic change in the economy or technology or cybersecurity or just the evolution of labor, one way to counteract that is just scale, raising capital, diversifying your wealth into other areas that lower the beta and create cash flow streams that are complementary, merging with another company, with another family office. Angela and I talked about this in our previous conversation. So would a merger or creating massive scale for a family office mean that there's a dilution to the elegance and the usefulness of a single family office? Not necessarily. You can still have your single family office. You can still operate from that with your passion, your legacy, your charter, your children, your succession, and your philanthropy, your art, your investments, right? But if you're thinking about these areas of change that Angela is referring to, just that are exponentializing and becoming transformative, right, moving faster, it seems like a wise way to go to think about creating more scale. If you want to build that scale, to diversify your beta and create more bandwidth, more cash flows, right, more power. Or let's say you have a single family office and you're sitting on a massive liquidity holding, as we've referred to many times. If you don't have succession planning in place, the children want to run that company, maybe it could be a defensive tactic to sell the business. You create cash. One thing that nobody can take away from you is just plain old cash. So it's another route to think about. Back to you.
Thank you, Adam. And we're heading a little bit to the home stretch. I believe we have 2 more topics to cover, and then we'll see if there's any audience interaction. But that reminds me, those of you that are in the webinar feature, and I believe I might have turned it on via social media as well, why y'all being so quiet? Feel free to interact via the chat feature with questions or commentary, whatever you want to do. I'll take a look at it. Doesn't mean I'm always going to read it, sometimes due to time constraints, but being interactive, especially if you're invited as a member or special guest into the webinar feature, is an important aspect of quote unquote of being live. So I will start. And the next topic, by the way, is adapting to global and technical trends. I think part of it we already covered to a degree in some of the other subjects, but there'll be some new comments to add. And here we go. All right. So first of all, I think SFOs are the answer to many, many different things. Do I think many SFOs sub $1 billion are that great? Not necessarily. Go back and hear my debate with Jamie McLaughlin. But do I think it's because they're too small or because there's issues internally or systemically? No, it's their own fault relative to a lack of focus, a lack of clarity, setting goals and strategy, and effectively doing what they need to do. But that is not this discussion, but it ties somewhat into the subject. So another comment that I'll make relative to adapting and putting this all together, and I'm going to go back and challenge Europe broadly a little bit again. There is a incredible amount of engineering and talent in Europe. It is so impressive, but it's held back often by the so-called work-life balance that they apparently believe in that is not going to help them moving forward. A lot of the demographic challenges that they have there, which are way worse than here in the US, and the whole issue of bureaucracy, which we think it's bad here in the States, it is way worse in practically every country in Europe. The fact that France has enacted, and they're doing everything wrong, the fact that France has enacted that you can't send a work email after 5 p.m., you are kidding me. That is a joke. So how are you going to adapt moving forward in a competitive world with North America and mainly with Asia with that sort of attitude? You're not. So a lot of this comes down also to succession and governance. Governance, how decisions are made, not making it overly hierarchical or bureaucratic. That's the mistake of most governance and where I disagree with many governance experts. But the opportunity of being strategic about it and doing it right is going to be very, very important. And ignoring the role that AI is going to play. And by the way, AI may be incredible from the aspect of governance, but do many of you even know that or are implementing or exploring that? No. You're making the excuse of you're too busy, you don't have enough time, you know what you know, and that's good enough. That is completely unacceptable. I am telling you, you're in for a world of hurt If not by the end of this decade, although I think partially by the end of this decade, definitely over time. So the disruption that's going to happen to financial services with blockchain, with fractionalization of assets, with the advent of AI agents that I mentioned, and everything that's happening with fintech solutions is going to be radical, and it's happening very, very quickly. There'll eventually be the advent, mainly more so through superintelligence, of products that we don't even know yet. We don't know the dynamics that are going to happen and going to change. And by the way, if you're a CEO or an executive, even in a single, but for sure a multifamily office, and you're currently making decisions based on only historical data, why the hell are you any better than currently what we have with technologies and AI? Imagine a year from now, or more applicably, probably closer to 2027 into 28, as we get closer to AGI, you are replaceable. And I'm trying to wake you up and have you understand that, but you don't want to believe that. You want to hear what you want to hear, that you're safe for the next 5, 10, 15, 25 years. You are absolutely not. You better have an open mind. You better learn. You better form a thesis, enhance your skill set, and have polymath and diversity relative to your capabilities and your strategic thinking. The world is changing rapidly. Cyber issues, deep fakes, and all the challenges that we're having are going to interplay, adapting to some degree a more interconnected, multipolar world that I mentioned earlier, and the advent of technological trends that are going to catch SFOs and MFOs off guard. I'm going to make the bold statement, not by the end of this decade, I'll give you that, but within 10 years, the majority of organizations that are family offices as we know them will be either wiped out, totally different than they are now. They're not going to be the continuity that you wanted in your family. I wish I had more time on that one. Adam, pardon me, I'm going to give you the 5 minutes now. In 3, 2, 1, here we go. It's all yours.
All right, everybody can start breathing again. I think Angelo's onto something here, but as we know, when there is change, there is more change in the prediction of that change, and we don't really know where it's going to go. But I agree with his trend line that the rate of change with the LLMs, with cybersecurity concerns, with nation-state actors, as we've seen recently, even today, the news with Russia getting involved in some infrastructure of our country and potentially China. That's just spycraft, but it can be effective and it can be distracting. And it also can be a concern for large private businesses and even families that don't have the technological capabilities, as Angelo's referring to stay really at the cutting edge of technology. So, as I said, maybe scale is an answer. Maybe bringing in expertise is an answer. Maybe outsourcing that is the answer. But as I've discussed on the Family Business Audiocast and also with Angelo, there's no one right answer that people are coming to, and we can't all be the Ray Dalios and Peter Dimenezes and Tony Robbins and the Deloittes. Like, we can't operate at that level all the time. Even those leaders, they have to evolve and change. So thinking about the deep tech and then the risk that Angelo's referring to, I'm seeing, again, scale being developed in order to counteract the velocity and the concerns of the change, or creating liquidity to get out of the game and just focus on cash, right? Where you can know it's in the bank, you can share that with your family, you can restart that. Maybe some of the things that are being done, and Angelo and I've talked about this, is reconfiguring the family office from a complex operating business into more of an incubation model. Maybe it becomes a lifestyle model. You have some venture, you have some cash, you have some real estate, you have some art, some philanthropy, you support your children, and you lower your expectations of return, but you diversify. So you need to bring in expertise in order to work on the succession planning, trust in estates, transition to your children, reinvest assets, understand venture capital, starting companies, pursuing passion investing, philanthropy, mission. What is your mission? What are the values? What is the this tremendous confluence of wealth creation with legacy? What is the original mission of the family office? What are the values and how do they change? So the concerns that Angela's referring to are relevant, but also in making those decisions to address those concerns has to be also considering what is the original mission of the family office in creating the wealth, and where is it now, and who's around to make those decisions, be part of governing and decision making that Angela's referring to, and how much of that is actually worth it. So when you look at the expected value equation and the different paths of what do we do now going forward, I think Angela's right that the decision making cannot be based as much on the past because things are changing too much. Succession planning, G2, G3, G4, technological innovation that Angela's referring to, concerns about security. Also, as a subsegment of this is protecting information. So even if you aren't building a company, diversifying in alternative investments, you have direct investments, that's all great for creating wealth. But I think it would be interesting for the audience and for families to stay close with Angelo, accounting firms, experts, about like how do you actually gather and protect your information for the company that you own, for your family office, and for your family your family ecosystem documents and so on. This is super important information, and it has to be protected from being accessed and lost out there in the world. It's very important for the continuity per Angelo's company, the continuity of the family business, regardless of where you're going with your wealth and dealing with these issues of tech and scale. Yep.
Thank you, Adam. Very insightful. We have one final topic that will do more audience interaction, but to make it a little bit more interactive at the moment, because I prompted all of you, there were some questions that came in. So what I'll do is there's two. And Pedro, absolutely, Adam is awesome. He's going to give you his contact info and his podcast info at the end. So just be a little patient. Maybe Adam and I will take 30 to 45 seconds, so brief, to dive into a question. Adam, the first question is, preparing the next generation to realize a family's vision is crucial. Now, that was from Cliff. It's more of a comment. Broadly, of course, I agree. I think governance and how decisions are made is very important. It may actually become more important in the new age and the world moving forward. It is incredibly valuable to be careful of top down. You need to engage the rising generation. They know more intuitively, and they're more native to opportunities that we don't see as an elder relative to things like AI and technology. Actually, the comment I gave before, it was a younger family member that said within 10 years, there'll be family offices that are utilizing and implementing AI heavily, and those that are kind of no longer around. So the opportunity of engaging the rising generation, even though they come with some ignorance and lack of experience, but also as an elder, we may have the experience, but dynamics have changed and we become more closed-minded. So mutually, a mission statement, a vision statement, a constitution is very, very important. Adam, I took a little longer than 45 seconds, but did you want to add or throw in your commentary to Cliff's comment/question?
I think Cliff's question gets to the essence of the family office, which is, what is the purpose of reconfiguring the wealth into an organizational structure? It's easy to spend money that you've made with less structure and to put it into lots of different activities. The beauty of the family office is the private, efficient organizational structure that allows the family as an organization, as a team, as a family to work with the best experts in the world, with their lawyers, with their private bankers, with their investment bankers, with their accountants, and to make a highly oiled company, right? That is the purpose of the single family office, to manage the wealth in the most effective organizational fashion. Now, the family's vision, as I was referring to in terms of legacy, in terms of purpose, I think it depends, as I've written in academic articles, and I've had experts, Alfredo Damascus, Angelo, Christina Wing, Massimo Bao, wonderful experts on my show, including Angelo, is, what is legacy? What is the vision? How does it change? It's different for every family. But as you said, including the next generation is essential, except for when the next generation is disinterested and or not capable. So it's nice to say that it's important to include their vision, but it is also possible that they're not there, they don't want to be there, and that's perfectly okay. And ultimately, the legacy of the wealth is, in my opinion, not just related to the generational transfer, it's related to the impact of the wealth itself.
Excellent. And Pedro, we'll get to your question after we finish the final topic, and we encourage others to interact and ask questions. So we are heading to the final topic. Maybe just a brief comment, adding a little bit to what Adam said, because I think the vision question is important. The rising generation needs capacity and capability. How they're going to become potentially resilient to anti-fragile is not you overly protecting them, not overly strategizing. Too much strategy without taking action is effectively inaction and doesn't cause forward thinking, and to me, eventually leads to fragility. I think overly hierarchical and bureaucratic and too many hands in the soup are also a negative and lead to doing everything for the rising generation where they don't understand and do things on their own. But again, that maybe is a subject for a different time. The final subject, kind of a little bit of a sexy one, is preparing for black swan events. But keep the questions coming. Thank you. Here we go. Okay. This comes down often to resilience planning. What I actually just said about capacity and capability in the rising generation to make them resilient, to have them undergo stresses, to have them take risks, are things that are very important and will help to lead to future continuity within the family. But there's grave dynamics with black swan events, including pandemics, that effectively you have no control over. You only control what you think and your response to those situations. So I look at a couple of different things. I look at, my God, what could go wrong that you kind of have no control over? We could argue from a philanthropic and spreading the gospel and all that, you may have a little bit of control, but for the most part, how do you plan for what you don't expect to see? Suppose there's a nuclear war. Suppose there's solar flares off the sun and boom, or it blows up in Yellowstone in Wyoming. There's lots of things that could go wrong, and I don't want to spend a massive amount of time on them, but some of it you can't plan for, and that comes down to what I call, again, capability or capacity and capability in the rising generations of the family. AI superintelligence will absolutely one day, maybe it will happen before the end of the decade. Probably not, but who knows? And yeah, there are some people that think it won't happen at all. They're very, very foolish. It will. And that will change everything. Everything that we know, I'm not going to say is coming to an end. It's going to be very, very different. So other things to prepare, maybe more so from a geopolitical situation, includes having multiple passports, residencies, banking, and relationships around the world, having a network of powerful fellow influential people in political relationships. Where to look at, we don't quite have enough time here, but I hinted and mentioned some geographies earlier in the discussion. Having legitimately an onshore and an offshore plan. Having a start over fund and how do you fund it and what goes wrong, and at least you have a block of 10, 20, $30 million or more. Now I could get into the nuances of varying trust structures and where are the assets then held in the Swiss mountains? Do I have physical gold in those locations? All things that are juicy and for a little bit of a different discussion. I would look at, speaking of gold, I would look at direct ownership of art in freeport zones and strategic locations around the world. I would look at things like farmland. Yes, I know governments could take it from you, but depending on your political affiliation, your capability and connections, that's why those things are very, very important. I would never underestimate the opportunity of a powerful global network. You're going to have to roll up your sleeves. You're going to have to travel. You're going to have to make this happen. I know it's easier not to do any of the things that I mentioned, but then you're not leading into becoming potentially anti-fragile. I don't know if no one will ever be totally anti-fragile. I mentioned a little bit before Bitcoin and certain crypto plays. I mentioned earlier diversifying somewhat from the US dollar. And we do go back, and I know it's a little boring for some, but governance is going to be very, very important. This is a risky world. I know we could look back to each decade and say, you know, Angelo, I grew up in the 70s. There was a lot of bad things happening then. You're not incorrect. And maybe we do look at the immediacy of the moment as being the worst. But with the nuclear issues, with 2 wars going on, which are not yet global, I get it. With all the challenges we're facing with our deficit, with the rise of AI, kind of cold civil war issues happening here in the US and in lots of areas around the world, changing political regimes, including in Brazil, in Mexico. This is a very, very trying time, especially if you're a non-US global family. Understanding these issues, having global diversity, in my opinion, also, if you're out of the US, even inside the US, even if you're not a green card or citizen, how to structure trust LLCs, what states, Wyoming, South Dakota, New Hampshire, Delaware, etc. I personally wouldn't necessarily pick Delaware, but that's just my call and a subject of a bit of a different time. So there is no perfect answer here. There are things that could go wrong. And the core theme of by 2030, lots is going to be different. And sadly, again, I think many of you are really, really unprepared for what could happen. Adam, I'll give you 5 minutes.
Okay, last topic. I like the Black Swan reference. And for those who haven't read the book yet by Nassim Taleb, who wrote The Black Swan, it is a fantastic book, and it covers the meaning of the Black Swan and all of the different ways in which society naturally seeks to diffuse the real preparation for Black Swan events, because naturally institutions and corporations and academics and think tanks, but mostly the corporation itself and government is looking to keep things smooth, keep things orderly, and is trying to operate on a consistent basis that can certainly relevant to operational management, to governance, even to wealth management. But I think it's important that people like Angela bring up Black Swan and what it means, which is an event that is not easily identifiable within a typical statistical and expectations perspective. It is something that comes in that you're not expecting, and that your thought process, thinking about intellectual capital, governance, succession planning, all the things are important. But ultimately, if it seems to me that if there is all this effort in creating a more robust intellectual capital for a family office, multifamily office, family enterprise, internally with human capital, as we look at the reports from Camden, Korn Ferry, Ron Diamond, et cetera, human capital is essential. And as Pedro and Cliff said here, is, building up the generational preparation, beefing up your human capital, of course, CTO, that's great. That's only one element. Secondly, there's also external knowledge. Bringing external knowledge into a family, into a company, lots of different ways to do that. Advisory board, committees, invited guests, strategic sessions, breakouts, summits, dialogues and groups like Angelo's Tiger 21. There's ways to get that knowledge. Again, that's not going to be necessarily sufficient. Black Swan theory is important to think about in the sense that using AI and technology and best thinking is essential, because if you really care about the risk to your business and your investments, is to create enough intellectual capital and advanced thought process is to be able to predict and respond to a Black Swan event. So Black Swan event is relevant for both being aware of them, to predict them, but then also to respond to them, right? So it's one thing to prepare, but if you're not ready to respond, then all that preparation is not that useful. If you really haven't prepared that much, you have to be even better to respond to it. So preparation is important, but I think the equally important to preparation is the ability to respond to it. It can be something in it can be equity markets. It can be a Black Monday. It can be something in your company. It can be cyber security risk, like Angela was saying. So I think the reason that these topics are really important is that the size and impact of the larger family offices really are massive companies. And it's really important for these companies and their owners to be prepared for these risks, because they affect not just their own wealth, but they affect their employees and their legacy and the communities that they're in. So it's the whole picture. As I say, legacy is really what you make it, but ultimately something that's important to not just yourself, but also your broader ecosystem that you operate in.
Excellent, Adam. Very efficient. Within probably with about 40 seconds to spare, so I'll just push the clock there. And finally, we're done with this stupid thing. So that was wonderful. Again, each of us would have liked to have going on more and have a little bit more back and forth, but sometimes keeping things concise is very valuable as well. We do want to take questions, so do keep them coming. There's a minimal of 2 in kind of the chat features now. Keep more coming, but just in case some of you have to leave within 2 minutes by the top of the hour, I want to be respectful of my guest and ask my guest to, before we get to the questions, Adam, why don't you tell the audience a little bit about how they could learn more about you, how they could subscribe to your LinkedIn and podcast, and if they wanted to email or reach out to you, how they could do so?
Okay, so briefly, I'm R. Adam Smith. I'm in New York. I'm in the family office ecosystem. I founded and run the Family Business Audiocast, which is a holistic global thought leadership platform that's open architecture that involves experts across the family enterprise system. That is a LinkedIn-based platform. Hope you can join and follow the Family Business Audiocast. We also have a newsletter called Family Business Chronicles, and then we have an expert contributor series of people like Angelo, where we repurpose very select content that's all LinkedIn. It goes into all of the global podcast channels. I sometimes also write articles with think tanks and business schools, and that goes into both my LinkedIn at R. Adam Smith, and then also into FBA. My website is adam-smith.com. I'm also very involved in the single family office these days, and we can talk more about that offline. My email is r.adam.smith.2009@gmail.com. I'm very grateful to be on the show today.
Thank you, Adam. And we have a minimal of 2 questions. And yeah, someone sent me a note. Angelo, I saw you on Max Pogg's program, Where's Your Trustworthy Cigar? You don't think I have one of my cigars near me. You don't know me. I only do it if a guest is worthy after the fact, or I could go outside and enjoy it. And yes, of course, I happen to have my Monte Cristo right here. That's going to be a lot of fun, because Adam more than earned it. Contributing to my bad habits, though, Adam, what could I say? I'm going to read one of the questions. Fostering entrepreneurship in our children is essential, especially given that 70% of wealth typically dissipates by the second generation, 90% by the third. There are some people that have questioned those numbers and statistics. Read some of the recent work of Dennis Jaffe and others, but let's broadly go with it. There's a variety of factors often built around decision-making, lack of continuity, and absolutely, in my opinion, if the family is not immersed in the wealth, if they're too passive with it, we outsource it, which is why, and I know I anger people, I'm a massive advocate of doing as much as possible internally and forming your own family office, your own holdco, and private trust company, things that I'm personally working on and active with myself. So I'm putting effectively my money, my resources where my mouth is. You're 100% correct relative to entrepreneurship, but I will remind everyone, did Elon create Tesla? No, he purchased it. Did Zuck create Instagram, which is the driving force behind much of quote unquote Facebook Meta now. No, he purchased it. And that was an incredible investment. So you don't necessarily have to start from scratch, which is why I like the potential and the opportunity that direct and controlling interest in private companies could give, even if you're not the founder and creator. So storytelling, putting up on a pedestal the generation that made the money and took certain risk. And this all goes back to certain things that Adam and I have spoken about relative to governance, the advent and the future, seeing around corners, which generally I think that most people in the family office world are abysmal at. On that note, Adam, before I suck all the air out of the room, did you want to comment on that comment question as well?
Sure, briefly. As I mentioned, if one cares about the continuity, the legacy, the continuation of a family enterprise and its legacy and its wealth, then absolutely there has to be a higher and higher bar to augment and fortify the human capital side with talent within and externally. So, for example, I think I can see families enrolling their children in higher education courses, Harvard X, executive education, think tanks, Tony Robbins, master classes. I think that continuous intellectual growth is essential internally. Or go on work escapes and different mentorship sessions, and touring other family offices, other companies. Going to business school, going to get a master's, getting a PhD, going to work at a think tank, go to Peace Corps, the CIA, go learn something, bring that knowledge back. Bringing in external knowledge to support that generational transfer of the children is also important in building advisory boards and creating your own think tank, right? Creating a community within the Angelo leaders of the world, not just going to conferences, not just reading McKinsey and HBR, but actually going and sitting down to have human-human interaction that cannot be underestimated and cannot be disintermediated by technology. So what Angelo and a few number of others do is super valuable in today's environment where the rate of change is so fast and the risk is growing higher, the bar is growing higher, is to how to get that edge of intellectual capital knowledge that is not disintermediated by technology. That's usually one-on-one interaction. So Angela referred to building a global network. It's important to get out there in the world. And I think also to augment the human capital internally and then externally and really raise the bar, push the envelope to advance the cause of the legacy, and in turn, probably create higher wealth in as well. Of course, I'm going to agree with Angelo that using that wealth and taking risks to acquire companies that are good deals and good acquisitions is a wise thing to do as a way to fortify the existing wealth. So wrap up on that one.
And the only comment I would have on that, because Adam did spark my interest a little bit, and I basically agreed with everything that he said. And I am respectful of intellect in academia and how people could learn. I do think how we learn is changing, and AI is going to be major impactful in that. We're one day heading, maybe before the end of the century, to holograms and more interactive of historical figures based on historical data and extrapolating through synthetic data, as it's called in the AI industry, further information that will make it very interactive. Where I think the challenge that we're facing, and I'm why not get in trouble with more industries, I have grave concerns over much of academia. I think they're extremely leaning in one direction. They're very one-sided. It's unfair. And I think the whole system is kind of rigged, and I don't like it. That doesn't mean that there's not value in it, including from the peers and fellow people that you're going to meet. But groupthink is never good. You want to be able to think for yourself. And I don't know if that's being encouraged as much as it used to be. And rather honestly, oh boy, now you know why I don't know if I'm the most hated person in the industry, but a lot of the so-called university programs relative to family offices, really, have they worked in a family office before? I am generally not impressed. I'm not saying that I'm perfect and my programs are incredible. I'm a white belt. I have a lot to learn, but I understand that and I want to get better and I iterate every second. I'm not beholden to bureaucracy and hierarchy about we need this professor and that professor, which is skewed to one way anyway. And a lot of them never even did anything or started a company or built a billion-dollar company to begin with. But time for me to get off my soapbox. I'm sorry. Maybe the last one, could you comment? And Adam, I'm going to let you lead with this one first. Could you comment from Pedro? Could you comment on what kind of services are likely to be outsourced by SFOs? And he's also kind of asking, will AI have a significant impact on that and back offices for family offices?
Yeah, it's a very timely question and a tricky one because family offices are growing and they want to build within and build their team and their children, right, to control and incubate and manage that intellectual capital internally. But at the same time, top expert service providers, at least for now, until AI is able to take over all of their work, it's super essential. And I think it's important, as I've said on my show and to my clients and friends, that to not pinch pennies on the service provider side, because that information and that network that Angela's referring to is super important. And they're really client centric. They're dedicated to serving their clients and providing the best information at that point in time to strengthen their clients' organizations. It can be accounting, can be information, can be insurance, can be preparation planning, lifestyle planning, offshore ecosystem building and trusts, and risk protection planning, as Angela's referring to in today's global economy. Also, a lot of these larger families, as yourselves, are Americans that travel a lot and enjoy Europe and Latin America, or vice versa. So these service providers are across the key areas super important. I would recommend that, if possible, to hire firms that have a global perspective and footprint. So lastly, think about that, like where you're traveling, where you're investing, where are your assets, what languages you speak, where's your family, where do you like to travel, where is the best place for your trust to be set up. Angela's referring to Singapore, Liechtenstein, Switzerland, et cetera. So it's important that service providers have at least expertise in those geographic areas, if not a team there. So I would add that as well to your question. Thank you for that.
And I suppose my answers to them comment on what kind of services are likely to outsource by an SFO. Now, again, I'm a little bit contrarian. I'm a believer in insourcing as much as you possibly could. And that's going to get easier and easier with the technologies and available services and the talent of your people that you should be paying properly, because they're so good in polymath. They're very diverse in terms of what they do. When you outsource, you do lose a level of privacy and control. I don't care what anyone else says. So, therefore, if you do need to outsource for a variety of reasons, are there times when you don't elect to develop the internal resources, or you need to, given a given specialty, or it's a commodity where kind of it does come down to price and maybe privacy and control are not quite as important? Sure. So there are going to be a variety of services that may fall under that ilk. So I don't deny that outsourcing and being more global is not important. I just think that it should be questioned more than it is. And again, if you want control and privacy, the single family office is king. We didn't really have time to get into in the next 5.25 years what will change in aggregation and reporting, what will be the impact of technology on that, and how AI would impact that, because many of you have heard that before. Obviously, it's going to get better and better. I think back to 10 years ago, I don't know, there was Archway and Adapar. I'm sure there were others. I know there were. There are way more now. Are all of them going to be here in 5 or 10 years? No, but it creates more opportunity for the consumer and drives down prices. And AI is making a grave impact on those aspects of technology and a tech stack for an SFO and an MFO as well. So yes, AI will be very, very impactful. I hate to harp on what some may deem to be the negativity of this comment. And again, it may not quite happen by 2030, but soon thereafter, there's going to be massive changes. You will not need as many people to do the level of services that are being done now. I don't want to hear you tell me we're always going to want human to human interaction. That is not true. That may be true for a percentage of people. We'll see what happens when the rising generation eventually, quote unquote, takes over. You really better be careful and future proof yourself, which is going to be hard enough if you know that and are working on it, as opposed to be caught blindsided. Adam, although you did already give a little bit of a close and your information, why don't you do an abbreviated version of that now? I'll do mine, and then we wrap it up and we're done. We can enjoy our weekend, and I can finally enjoy my great cigar.
Okay, I'm glad to get you to that moment on Happy Friday.
Thank you.
To everyone, and I'm pleased to be here and enjoy the higher level and less structured discourse that Angelo provides you all and with his guests. It's really enjoyable, and it provides for a more rich dialogue, I think, than most conferences and shows. So again, I'm Artem Smith. I am proud to serve and very passionate about working in the family enterprise ecosystem. I've covered hundreds of family offices. Obviously, there's maybe 10,000 in the world now, so there's quite a large community. And as we've discussed in the past, and Angela and I have commented that there's going to be a continued growth in both the SFO and derivative organizations that have a single company or single family office, as well as the multifamily offices or wealth management firms or holding companies. I'm a big proponent of the benefit, the flexibility, the optionality of the holding company, which includes attention to operational excellence, this intellectual capital gathering we're talking about, and also savvy M&A and capital formation internally and externally, to create more wealth and protect a legacy. So great to be here today. Thank you for your time and for listening to our conversation.
You're very kind, Adam. In terms of my close, one, it's been incredible having our Adam Smith on. I hope you all enjoyed it. I encourage you to reach out and follow what he does. And those of you that may be newer to me, I'm Angelo Robles. Many of you would know me as a longtime founder and CEO for way too long. I'm old. A family office association, an endeavor that I loved, that I sold, that I learned from, and that I've been humbled by. And the opportunity now of being a little bit of a pundit and thought leader, a consultant, running a private membership organization that's very intense and very intimate and boutique-y, coupled with some of my more public-facing platforms like my interviews, which are deemed to be longer form, a little more intense, and going down subjects that simply others, for a lack of a better word, are too afraid to. So simply go to YouTube, follow me on my larger platform at Family Office. Yes, I happen to own that. And at Family Office TV, certainly on LinkedIn. I do have a Rumble where we're going to start to add proprietary content to that. Just go and look me up. You'll find me. And newer on my Apple and Spotify for those a little more old school that like traditional. This was a great discussion. I'm going to do more and more of this. And my members are familiar in my writing and my proprietary work that I do for them, that these are subjects that I love to cover. So go to angelorobles.com and simply look into my membership and be a part of it. Interact face-to-face, digitally, privately, in all the work that I do. And I promise you, it'll be more unique and proprietary content. You may not always agree with me. You may even get mad at me, but that's okay. It's not the normal, vanilla, and boring things that you're used to hearing with people that are afraid to go and take a stand on something because they don't want to be proven wrong. I've been proven wrong before. I'm going to be wrong again, but damn it, every now and then I am correct and I really hit it out of the park. You just have to kind of figure out which one of those are going to be. Building upon Adam's comment a little bit, yeah, there'll be growth, especially of single family offices leading through the end of this decade. But then I don't really know what's going to happen after that. There may actually be too many in terms of SFOs and MFOs. I think it's going to get very, very unique, very tricky, a little scary. And again, we're going to need less and less people working in them. That is a fact. There is no way around that. You may want to argue my timeline, and you might be right. But the fact of my comment, whether you like it or not, and I'm not going to just give you what you want to hear and give you ice cream if you're an MFO. Many of you know I've been critical of the MFO, so-called MFO industry for a variety of different reasons, at least respect the fact that from my perspective, I'm telling you the truth and I'm not sugarcoating it to get your consulting or other assignment. So on that note, now, don't get me wrong, many SFOs are tired and depleted and not ready for the turn of this decade, and definitely not for what's going to happen in a very unique world coming in the 2030s. There is a chance, if you act on it now and want to be a part of the solution, that you might be able to get your way out of it, but we'll see. So simply go to angelorobles.com and join, become a participating founding member. I am active every month, maybe except for December, with actual in-person programming and proprietary content. On that note, I thank you all. I again thank Adam or Adam Smith. Absolutely go and follow and subscribe. I do greatly enjoy his audio cast. He's had on amazing guests, and I highly encourage you to participate. Adam, you've been a great guest. I appreciate you going overtime with me. Have a wonderful weekend, and thank you, everyone.
Thank you.